Welcome to Lesson 4. We're going to talk about the articulation statement, which is an important part of the portfolio, and it does count a lot of points. So as you are watching this today and taking notes, hopefully, you can see some of the things that we will expect you to do in the articulation statement. The articulation gives you an opportunity to do several things. And right now, you're going to do an autobiography. That's what this is. You're going to discuss your life, your skills, your goals, and it's a major section. The articulation is a minimum of 20 pages. It's a minimum. And so what we're saying is to be certain that you stay with us and work this thing through. As we're going through each section of the articulation statement, hopefully you can go back and review this again to be sure you have the right things on this particular course, that you've addressed it. And I hope that we can help you with that today. So think of this as an extended autobiography, and I want you to also think about this as an opportunity to provide information that you couldn't in other sections. Now, we realize at times it's going to be difficult to talk about your life, and we ask that you discuss only the incidents or events that you feel comfortable in discussing. So I've had it before where people have become very emotional during this particular part of the portfolio because they write about things that have happened in the past, and we'll mention that as we go through it. And it becomes more difficult because when we reflect on ourselves, we reflect on the history that we've had, it's difficult. It's something that requires a lot of thought. And for a lot of you, you're going to remember things that maybe you had forgotten, and some of you will say, well, you know, I wished I could always forget those things. And that's just part of life itself. But what we'll do is to think of this as an opportunity then for you to share this with your children and grandchildren. And it'll help you to know about your many skills that you have. It'll give you the chance to talk about your contributions. And you may have forgotten, like I said, all you've done, but think about your contributions. Think of this as an opportunity to give more to your portfolio. And I think that's what will happen if you use this section correctly. So as you're writing your competency statements, as you're writing other parts of the portfolio, it is sometimes good to go ahead and open up the section on the articulation, and you're writing about that, and you're doing your comp statements on another part of it, and you're working very carefully, and you are dealing with this in the best manner possible. Because you don't want to get burned out. You don't want this to be a 12 midnight portfolio or 1 a.m. or certainly not a 3 a.m. portfolio. You want this to be something you're proud of. So this is your opportunity. This is your opportunity. Well, we're going to discuss the sections of the articulation. These sections need to be clearly labeled, with each section divided from the other section. Don't just let this be a run-on. Most important section is extra-institutional, and I want you to spend a large amount of time on this section. So the following slides that we'll put up here are going to be the different sections that we will discuss. So we want you to spend a large block of time working on the extra-institutional. Go ahead and divide these sections off, because when we are reading these things, when the readers go through it, we want to be able to clearly see what you have said about each area. And so the introduction section will obviously be the first section that we will talk about. This section clearly lets the reader know who you are. In essence, I was born on a mountaintop in Tennessee is one way to approach the section. Some writers approach this, as we talk about, in a chronology of events. There's different ways to approach it. We have some students who talk about a major event beginning it. For instance, we had one student that began the story with being run over by a car at around the age of 9 and drugged by the car for some length of time. And this was a momentous and horrible event in that person's life. And what you can see from this is that you have options to start it off, either in a shock wave, or you can do it in a different way that we're talking about here. You can go ahead and start it in a history. I was born on a mountaintop in Tennessee. You can also do this in different ways. You will need to make up your mind how this goes. And I would suggest that as you're dealing with this is that you become innovative. It's your autobiography. It's your articulation statement. So use it to your very best of the abilities that you have. The introduction, as we said, the key is to tell the reader who you are and how you reached this point in life. And this becomes, as we talk about here on this slide, a good section for personal reflection. Reflect on how you got there. And, you know, as some of us become almost moralist, we talk about lessons learned, the things that I should have done that I didn't accomplish. And that's difficult. That's difficult, but you may want to do it that way. Some of you have a very innovative writing approach. You have experience in writing, and you'll be able to do this. This is why I think that you can open both working on comp statements, working on the job task analysis, and other sections of the portfolio simultaneously. Because this is not a boring section to write. This is a very self section to write. You're concentrating highly on what you are able to do. Now, the next section of your articulation is the one we have indicated was the most important. You need to be very careful in the extra-institutional section to cover each of the questions. Do not contradict other parts of the portfolio, such as the resume or job task analysis. So you want to answer each of the sections very carefully. One of the things is that sometimes people will contradict themselves. They will tell us in the articulation that they held X number of jobs. They get to the task analysis and that job may not be there, or there may be a mistake. So be sure that there's congruency between the articulation, job task analysis, and competency statements. Certainly your resume should be congruent with what you're talking about too. Now there are some questions that you'll answer. And first, we want you to tell for credit in this course. Your jobs may not all relate together, and your application for work credit may not contain all the jobs you've held during the years. So what you want to do is you want to tell us what time period you're going to talk about in the extra-institutional. In the introduction, you may have told us that you were a firefighter and a soldier, and now you're selling insurance. And maybe for your application for work-life experience and your job task analysis and your comp statements, you're talking about selling insurance. And so in the extra-institutional, you're going to tell us about selling insurance. You're not going to tell us about the days as a soldier or the days as a firefighter. So your jobs may not all relate together, because it'd be hard to relate soldier and firefighter together unless you'd been a military firefighter. But your application for work credit may not contain all the jobs you've held, and you should realize that from our earlier tapes and talking about it. So in the extra-institutional section, you're going to talk about all these jobs that you're applying for credit in. Tell us what years you're going to talk about. So I might indicate that in 1998 through 2002, these are the years that I'm going to address. And you'll explain that you held 2 positions during that, insurance in Allstate and State Farm or whatever that you did. So I think this is something that you want to be sure you do as you start. The next area in the extra-institutional you're going to ask for is that if you're asking for more than one position to be evaluated, if you need to clearly discuss how the skills from the jobs relate to each other. Don't make it a stretch. So if you're applying for credit in 10 years and you have 3 jobs, butcher, baker, and candlestick maker, they need to relate to each other and show us how they relate. Don't stretch it. I'd rather see fewer years that relate to the DOT number you've chosen, fewer years that relate, than get a whole bunch of jobs together and it's confusing for the reader to say, I don't understand how butcher relates to candlestick maker. A good example of how jobs might relate is be an elementary teacher, a secondary teacher, a high school counselor, and a principal. There is a relationship there. There is a actual movement toward a higher position. So I think that's important. Tell us if you're evaluating more than one position, or at least you're wanting us to evaluate more than one position, and how do they relate? Third question that you want to ask yourself relates directly to your task analysis. What we want you to do is discuss each component skill. Remember, the component skill were the middle skills, because you're telling us there something about each component skill. Go into great detail about each component skill. Talk about the value. Underline them in the text. Underline these component skills. And talk about each one of the component skills. Discuss them. Give us examples if you can. That helps to be able to award you work-life credit, that we better understand it. Now, we know what your atomistic skills are. We know what your instrumental skills are, because those are, are your main skills. But we need to know something about these mid-level or middle skills called the component R. So we want you to be very careful here to give us that information. And that's important. That's very important. So discuss each component skill. And that's a major part of the extra-institutional learning section, a big part of it. Spend some time with it. Go back and talk about it. Give us examples. Underline each component skill. Now, the fourth question that we want you to answer in the extra-institutional learning indicates that if you're applying or not applying for non-collegiate or training credit. If you're applying for training credit, discuss the training you had and discuss the skills you acquired from the training in great detail. So what we want you to do is to be sure that you discuss the training that you want us to evaluate. Now, there's going to be another section of your portfolio later on called non-collegiate credit, where you'll write some competency statements and you'll submit an outline of the training you've had. But in this section, we want you to talk about it. We want you to mention about the training you've had that you want to apply for. Now, let me go back. If you're applying for credit as a firefighter and you have some training in an area such as computers, that's not training that related to firefighting. But if you had gone to a special firefighting school, you may want to include that in and talk about that training that you had received. If you've decided to apply for training credit, or what we call non-collegiate credit, that's what we are interested in you doing. So it's important at this time that you deal with this in the best way possible. Make your decision. Do you want training credit or do you not want to apply for training credit? And that's important, and I hope all of us will be able to make that decision fairly quickly in this course, and we're kind of early yet. Now, in conclusion about the extra-institutional, we believe this section is extremely important. We want great care to be exercised to explain the component skill. And you want to convince the reader of your high level of competence. Be sure that you convince the reader that you are indeed competent. This section is one that we want to turn to, because we can't evaluate you on all the bad things that happen in your life or the introduction and say, well, let's give this person credit because he or she had a bad early childhood. We can't do that. This is not what we rate your evaluation on. We're going to go to these competency statements. We're going to look at your task analysis. We're going to look at the extra-institutional section. How well did you provide information to us? Did you give us the information to prove that you were competent? So the extra-institutional section of the articulation is very, very important, and you should stay with it. Well, the next area you want to talk about is interpretation of inventories. There are a number of inventories that you will be required to do in the course, and your instructor will let you know what inventories that he or she wishes to have. You should carefully review them in planning your course. So in other words, you want to talk about these inventories. So if you took a self-directed search or you did another type of inventory such as a stress test or whatever, and you want to talk about what you found out about it, explain it. Explain the intrinsic value of the inventories. What did it do for you? What did it help you with? So you want to discuss these inventories, interpret them, and go into detail. You should do that very, very succinctly. Talk about it so there's no mistake. If an inventory says that you should be in a social service work, that's information for you. If you are in whatever, put that in. And it can be, again, like a lady that was told that, she should be a mortician, and she was offended by that. But after looking at it more carefully, she realized that She has empathy for people. And maybe all of us should look at that. Again, people are saying, well, you're going to hold 7 careers. Now it's gone up to very, very high numbers, the types and numbers of careers that people are going to hold in their lifetime. We're not static anymore. We don't require a maintenance fee once we reach 62 or 65. People are working up into their 70s and beyond. Well, you want to talk about your collegiate experience too, as we say. You've already talked about your inventory. You want to talk about what courses you took and how valuable they were. Discuss in detail. So you might want to do that in a way such as historically. You could indicate that you've taken courses in your freshman year and so on and so on. You talk about them. What were the value of those courses? Then you were your sophomore, your junior year, now you're in your senior year, wherever you are. Some students say that's not a good way to do that. They say, well, I'm going to talk about the coursework in a different way. I'm going to go and talk about it in this way. I'm going to go ahead and say, well, I took 18 hours of mathematics, 16 hours of science, 32 hours of welding, and they'll talk about these and describe it. So they've grouped them by courses. Others, as we said, did it historically. Others go and list the categories by the ones that were most important to them, the courses that were most helpful to them. So it depends on what you want to do and how you approach this. I would suggest be innovative in this approach too. One other thing, if you have a problem with your GPA, your current GPA, if it's below the 2.25, provide a rationale why it's not a reflection of your ability. So you came in on some type of a special agreement with admissions or whatever, and your GPA is low. Why is it low? What happened to you? Describe that. Indicate what happened, and that's not a reflection of your ability. And you want to be convincing. And this is also helpful to yourself to realize how much ability that you have that maybe has not been used. We don't want you to get discouraged in this course. That's why you need to work on this course at regular intervals. Don't get behind. Stay in contact with email with your instructor. Continue to submit any assignments that your instructor has asked you to do. That will help bring up your GPA. Remember that there are different requirements in the course, and the portfolio is one, but the instructor may have something like an exam or 2 exams or outlining these presentations. The instructor may have other assignments that you have to do. So you want to be sure that you have the instructor on your mind. You're saying, yes, what does this instructor want me to do? And how can that improve my grade? You don't want to wait to the end, submit your portfolio, and say, whoops, I forgot to do some homework, which drops your letter grade maybe 1 or 2. Keep that GPA high. The next section of your articulation is a neat one, planning. And what you want to do here is it has 3 different areas. You want to talk about your future life goals. What do you want to accomplish in your life? Where are you going in your life? You want to own a ranch. You want a new position that is going to allow you to buy a speedboat. You want to, your life goals are to become a political person. You want to be elected state rep, or you want to be a nationally known individual. All of these life goals that you have, and they're all kind of interrelated, you can tell. But you want to write about those, because now there's something important here. As you're writing these, you need to go ahead and look up the term PERT chart, and because a PERT chart is going to be made and put in the portfolio also, and we'll talk about that in later lessons, where you indicate what you're going to accomplish first and how that relates to the next goal. So you're going to PERT chart these goals to a tune of about 15 years. So we want you to look very carefully at your goals, your career goals. What do you want to do? Well, I'm going to continue to sell insurance, then I want to become a supervisor or manager of a district, or a district manager within this. Then I want to do this. Then I want to retire and I want to teach school. I want to do this. I want to finish teaching school, and then I want to have my own consulting business. I've known people that had numerous careers, as many as 4 very good careers that these individuals have had. And that's a tremendous situation. And then you want to talk about your educational goals. So we've already talked about future life, career. Now we get into educational goals. What do you want to do? Are you going to stop at this BAAS degree? This is a Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences. Your major is Applied Arts and Sciences. Your professional development needs to be put together so that, you know, if you're going to go for a master's degree, are there any prerequisites that you could put into this degree plan? Think about that. And as you're looking at the occupational education website about courses that you might put in your professional development, which ones of those are going to help you? What type of education do you want? Where do you want to end up? Do you want to become a professor at a university? Is that what you're interested in? So you're going to head for the doctorate. You want to get a law degree. These are very important, and you need to explore them. Look at the Occupational Ed site. Go to the career services at this university, set up an appointment, look at some of the options they have. Scroll through the website for Texas State University, looking at the different departments that you can get a master's in later. Look at the occupational education program and look at our master's degree. This is all important, but it takes time, and no one can just say, John or Jane, this is what you need to do. That's why it's important that you spend time looking at your own talents and answering these three sections. They're very important because you're going to PERT chart them, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. So planning is important. Now, in the first section of the life goals, as we said, you were describing and defining your life goal. Why did you select them? And which goals are really the most important? In other words, decide which goals are the ones that you think are the very, very important for you. I think that's something that's always important, to prioritize your goal. A person says, well, my wife is important to me. A person says, my husband's important to me. A person says, my children is important to me. But the problem is they don't spend any time with them. So what we say is not always what we really do. And so what you want to do is decide and select the goals that are important, and you want to prioritize them. Now, your career goals, we're saying, how are they related to your life goals? Why are the goals important again? There we go again. Where you are in your career progression. I mean, you may be already toward the end in your career progression. Maybe that's where you are. Are you satisfied with your career at this point? In other words, these are all things that we're swirling around here for you to put in this section. You know, life, career, and education goals as you address each one. Are you satisfied where you are? Are you dissatisfied with your accomplishments? And a lot of us know that we could have done better. There are many things that I could have changed in my life which would have enhanced my career goals, and I failed to do so. Then I can only blame myself. And I can only say, well, you know, you just didn't put the time in that you needed to, or you didn't take the steps needed. And then you want to examine these for the degree planning process, as I said. And I mentioned this a while ago, and I want to mention it again. Will the BAAS degree help you reach the goal? Have you contacted business or industry to be certain the BAAS will work? Will you need a master's? I mentioned that a while ago of searching out, but now you're getting more specific in the educational goals. You're looking and saying, well, this is a Bachelor of Applied Arts degree, major in Applied Arts. Remember, it's not a major in occupational education. We have modules in our degree, and we do things a little bit different than other departments in the university. That's the nature of it. We're a non-traditional. We're multidisciplinary. We include courses from various departments, as you well know. You want to be well acquainted with your degree so that somebody says, what degree did you take and why did you choose it? Well, I chose the BAAS. And you also need to have a plan of what you're going to do down the road. And this is forcing you to do New Year's resolutions whatever time of the year you're taking this. You're making resolutions to go in a direction. And some of you probably need to put these on your cabinets or your bathroom mirror and say, well, here's the goal that I want to achieve, and here's how I'm working on it. And that's important. And again, your educational goals. Determine, too, as you answer that, can you afford the time away from your family and friends? How will you finance your education? Discuss your age. Is that a factor? In other words, you know, hey, I'm a certain age at this point. Does that make a difference? You know, you can't obviously know for some positions, but is it something I want to consider? Do I want to give up my current career and take a new career, start with a little bit less salary simply because I'm starting over? Do my interests and aptitudes support my goals? In other words, my interest, I'm interested in becoming an astronaut. My aptitudes say that, hey, I've got a problem with that. I really don't know physics. I can't pass the mathematics very well. So the problem that we see then is my interest is high, but my aptitudes are low in that area. And that's something that all of us must face. We must choose the way that we need to go. And there's going to be a discussion later on in this course about vocational choice, to kind of have you think about vocational choice. And these are lectures that we want you to be aware of, that they will be discussed, because this whole course should become together seamless. This should all relate. And hopefully at this time the light bulb's turning on and you're saying, wow, I'm talking about my skills I have, I'm forecasting the future. And we want to plan future educational goals, but we need to be sure that my aptitudes and interests support them. That's important. Now, the next section that we want to write about is a relationship. You've got another section there between extra-institutional